Welcome to the Let's Talk About Love, Sex, and Infidelity podcast with your host, Todd Creager. Todd has over 35 years of experience working with thousands of couples as a licensed therapist in his private practice. Todd shares his insights on this show. It's never too early to divorce-proof your marriage or too late to heal yourselves and have the relationship you truly want.
Todd Creager. I work with couples and help them rekindle passion. I also help people deal with infidelity, which is going to be a part of the subject of my talk today. And I also help individuals to overcome trauma, usually using an approach, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR. But yes, my work with couples in infidelity has been definitely a huge part of what I do. And today's topic is, why do men and women cheat? Or more specifically, what are the differences? What makes men cheat that's different than women? And I oftentimes think about what I'm going to say before I'm going to do this talk, and I will look at a few research articles or YouTube videos, get a sense of what people out there are saying. I combine that with my own experiences as a person who has a very large sample of couples to work with. So I guess I could say I've done my own research with some of these topics. But for this talk, I actually did a little bit more than usual. As a professor at USC, I have access to many very academic journals and articles. And I wanted to look at this topic of why men and women cheat, because when I was looking at some of the things I see out there's a lot of pop psychology, and there's a lot of videos, and they're kind of simplistic, I thought, maybe. And I wanted to check, maybe they're not. Maybe these superficial, I'll say, these pop psychology kind of things are right. And basically, what do they say? A lot of why men and women cheat is based on evolutionary theory. Now, what does that mean? Men, since we could have sex with a lot of people, and since evolution says, and survival says that we want to proliferate and have as many children of our own as possible, that for men to have sex with a lot of people makes a lot of sense. But for women to endure and their security and their offspring to survive, it's best that they find a solid, stable man. And so when it talks about men and women, which is the topic of this particular talk, then you could say that, well, it's evolutionarily speaking, men will cheat more than women because of that evolutionary principle that we want to have as many mini-me's as possible. And for women, it's a whole different ballgame. They need to have one stable person. And there are other aspects of evolution too. Of course, we can conceive, men can conceive every day, or sometimes more than once a day, and of course that's not the case with women. So there's a lot of those evolutionary theories that are going on. But there's other ways to look at this question of why men and women cheat. And in my extensive research, there are things such as power and infidelity. And they have found that power is a major variable. Some really good studies across the world. And they found that this was true for at least 160 countries, where the more powerful a man was, the more likely he could cheat. And then they looked to see if the same thing happened with women. And lo and behold, they found that the more powerful the woman was, in other words, especially financially, where they were able to not depend on a man for financial means, that they too were more likely to cheat. So that's an interesting thought, right? That definitely makes us think, well, what's going on here? Maybe power has something to do with it. In my own practice, I have seen many reasons why men cheat and many reasons why women cheat. One of the things you hear in some kind of, I would say, self-help articles is that men, they cheat for sex and women cheat for love. That's true. Sometimes. Sometimes it's true, but not always. It is true that as a whole, I've noticed that men are more visually stimulated. So of course that men might cheat more because of what they see, where women may cheat more for how they feel. That is true some of the time. But the more I look at my own practice and the more I look at some of these articles, there aren't any definitive answers here. Why men cheat and why women cheat. It seems like there's more similarities actually than differences. So, yes, with freedom, women have maybe more freedom to find the relationship they want, or they could act out when they're not happy in the relationship they're in, just like men have been able to do historically more easily because they have had the power. So that might be true, but what is it that men want and what is it that women want? And even though one can say that since men are visually stimulated, many men, what they want is the pretty person, the younger person. I have seen many men go after a person because they felt more accepted. And I'm not blaming the other person. This is not what this talk is about. As a matter of fact, anyone that has heard me knows that when I work with couples where there's been infidelity, I always say that the person who cheated is 100% responsible for the choice that they have cheated. However, that the relationship was co-created by both people. And sometimes relationships are a factor in why people cheat. Not always. As you see by the kind of tenor of my talk here, there's not a lot of black and white. For example, I just worked with several people today, several women today, where the men were brought up in families where they were raised by very narcissistic parents, and so they also became narcissistic themselves. Both of these men, this happens to be today that this happened, and they both cheated, and they cheated because they're hungry for constant validation. And so even though they both blame their partners for not giving them validation, so it was their fault, the truth of the matter is nobody can give anybody constant validation. So in this case, the factors really weren't relationship. As far as the way I assessed it, the infidelity had really nothing to do with the relationships. It really had to do with their personality structures, the defense mechanisms, and on and on. So it just continues to get more complicated. So back to the question, what do women want? What do men want? In the case of these narcissistic men, they want constant admiration, constant approval. Nobody can give them that. So they're not going to last with anybody. So that's why this person cheated. But I've had other men who cheated because they just felt rejected a lot, and they were looking for emotional closeness. This is what people might say that's why women might cheat. But I had, again today, one of those days, where I had a man who cheated because he was craving the emotional closeness. Now, we are not blaming the partner. As a matter of fact, in this particular case, the partner had her own challenges, and they both contributed to some of the relationship dynamics that led to him feeling rejected. But I'm just stating that why he cheated was for emotional reasons more than any other. At least that's what it appears. Sometimes, of course, there's more than one reason. I have had women recently in my practice where I had one where she cheated because she was in such an extreme religious situation that she was so suppressed that there's a part of her that just wanted to be free and unencumbered. And so she has sex for freedom. She didn't have sex for emotional connection at all. As a matter of fact, she's not interested in having sex for any kind of emotional connection. And now that her husband discovered the infidelity, they've talked about it. That she was not interested in any of these sexual situations to have an emotional connection because of her personal childhood and her personal dynamics, which was suppressed. So yes, infidelity oftentimes is a solution to a problem. It's not a good one because it's so hurtful. I'm not at all in favor of infidelity. Again, my point is that when you look for why men cheat and why women cheat, it's not so simple. And you have women who are looking for a more of an emotional connection, absolutely true. But you also have, like in this case, a woman who was looking for freedom, looking to break out. And the man she married, it just seemed, at least she experienced it as a repeat of the emotional prison that she was in. So this wasn't about emotion. And it was even less about the other person. It was more about experiencing a different self inside of her, a self that desires freedom. So why do men cheat? Why do women cheat? I think that what we have to do is look at our own individual histories, our own development. Be curious about what this part of me that has cheated, that has probably sabotaged, if not ended, the marriage or the committed relationship I'm in. What was that part needing and wanting? And it's very different for every person. The questions to ask are, where have I been deprived? In my marriage, but also maybe in my childhood. What am I looking for? I've had both men and women cheat because they were looking for someone to understand them. Again, not blaming the partner. As a matter of fact, oftentimes in these situations, the partner who was betrayed has the potential to be more understanding, but people just quickly react and they don't work it out together, or they don't get someone like myself to help them work it out. So again, I'm repeating myself, but the person who cheated is 100% responsible for the choice. But we're looking at why people cheat, and we need to go deeper. We need to understand it. So we got to cut through all the pop psychology, quick, easy answers that people think we know why, and realize that even though there are some differences, some gender differences, generally, men are visually stimulated, women are kinesthetically maybe more stimulated. Sometimes it's easier for men to have one-night stands than women. That is absolutely true, but it's not always true. It depends on what they are looking for and what they are seeking. The person I talked about that are looking for freedom preferred one-night stands because that's what was helping her experience that self that was so deprived. Again, not saying that was a good way to do it. Surely never fair to the person who is who's been withheld from the truth. So I just wanted to say that, get you thinking a little bit, get you exploring. I think the whole issue, I definitely found some interesting, good articles about power. That's interesting because the power dynamics in society are changing between men and women. And so some of the reasons women are maybe cheating more now is that they can. And maybe some of the reasons they're cheating are different than it used to be when they did cheat more, less frequently than maybe now. The statistics vary very widely. It's even difficult to say. The percentage of men and women that cheat, a lot of it also depends on how we define cheating. So I hope I've confused you enough, but I hope more importantly that I've got you interested and curious and realizing that we're all different, and that really the most important thing, and I'm passionate about this, is to find out what's really going on at the core. What is really driving these behaviors that are so hurtful, whether we're men or women or straight or gay or gender non-binary or whatever it is. I know this particular talk is just talking about men versus women, but no matter what gender we are, it's always important to be curious about what makes us do the things we do, including cheating, including infidelity. That's all I got to say for now about that. This is Todd Creager, making the world safe for love.
That's it for today's episode of Let's Talk About Love, Sex, and Infidelity podcast with your host, Todd Creager. For free resources and materials, head over to toddcreager.com. Loved this episode? Head over to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and leave a review. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you.